Have you ever heard the superstition about a welcome mat outside of your door?
No.
You shouldn't have one. Reason is because...
Let me guess. It's gonna fucking invite entities into your...
You're basically inviting anything to come inside your house. Meaning you're inviting demons, evil spirits.
I never heard that before.
Yeah, bro, because you're inviting it in.
Alright, so do you think that rubs off and like it brings evil people try to break in, rob?
Maybe you could just bring all the bad energy but again, that's just a superstition, bro, that people believe, oh, it's bad to have a welcome mat. Some people are just like, it's just a mat, bro. It's not that serious.
You already know the comments gonna be like, bro, I can't have anything no more. I have one right now.
That ass, bro. I know a lot of people out there have a welcome mat, bro. So just be aware if some weird shit starts happening in your house, bro, some ghost activity, maybe it's because of your welcome mat.
I'll take you down to Sally's room. Sally kind of had a tragic life. Sally died in the house. This was Sally's room when she lived here. And Sally, I think, may still haunt this place. When we were staying in this one, every morning I would wake up and I had this sensation that someone was sitting on the end of the bed.
She was a troubled soul.
I've had guests say they've had stuff moved around in Sally's room and, you know, somebody trying to talk to them or something.
Oh, what the freak?
Oh! What was that?
Yes or no? Should we open the chest?
Yes. Oh!
It literally said, "It is Sally."
That's actually really weird.
I'm not even like doing it. Have you seen her? And she died in this room?
In the
Right there,
bathroom.
sometimes something is left behind after they're here.
Over 60 school children aged 6 to 12 were playing outside when something strange appeared in the sky. A metallic disc-shaped object hovered, then landed in a field just beyond the playground. The children froze, their eyes locked on what would happen next. Multiple small figures emerged, humanoid, but not human. They were short with an oversized head, massive black eyes, and a tight-fitting black suit. They moved without sound, almost gliding. Then suddenly, one was right in front of them. The children stood paralyzed, their minds flooded with something terrifying. Some heard messages, others had visions of environmental destructions and warnings of a dying planet. Others felt an overwhelming sense of fear as the beings were telepathically communicating with them. And then, just as quickly as it all began, it was over, only lasting 15 minutes. The UFO lifted off, vanishing into the sky. The children, shaken, ran to tell their teachers, but they didn't believe them. Word of the alien encounter got out fast, and investigators, psychologists, even journalists came to question them. Each kid telling the same detailed story of what happened. Many believe the kids made this up and was just the result of children's imaginations, but others believe it really happened. Even decades later, the aerial phenomena remains one of the most famous alien encounters ever. It wasn't just one person who witnessed it, it was over 60 people.
This is how a TV game show caught a serial killer who'd gotten away with 4 murders for 20 years. It was the 22nd of December 1985 in the sleepy town of Milford Haven. Now, the area is absolutely stunning, surrounded by picturesque countryside. However, on the night in question, the area was anything but peaceful. A fire blazed inside a 3-story farmhouse, and inside were Richard Thomas and his sister, Helen Thomas. Horrifically, both people were found dead inside the property. But there was a twist. Their cause of death was not the fire. They'd been shot, and someone had burned the house down to try and conceal evidence. Clearly, a very dangerous murderer was on the loose. Police really barely had any leads. This was a really low crime area, so they just weren't used to investigating murders. That was until the killer struck again. In June 1989, Gwenda and Peter Dixon were on their final day of their summer holiday. Now, they were loving the gorgeous views and they were going for a stroll by the beach. That's when they were confronted by an armed man who mugged them and then shot them both dead at point-blank range. Now, again, unfortunately, police officers had very little to go off, apart from the fact that they were able to trace the couple's bank cards, and after they'd been stolen, there was evidence that the killer had withdrawn money from the accounts. Now, this was back in the day when there really wasn't as much CCTV as there is now, but witnesses did come forward to report that they had seen a man by the local cash point acting extremely suspiciously. They were able to provide a fairly good description of what the man looked like, and an artist's impression was created. Frustratingly though, despite this being published, nobody really came forward to say that they recognised this man. Terror in the community continued with a series of armed raids. During one raid in November 1996, the victim actually bravely activated their personal alarm and the attacker escaped. In the rush of leaving the property, the attacker left several items at the back of the property which provided police with vital clues. Now, these were gloves, a weapon and a balaclava. Police decided to ask locals to come forward to provide their DNA. This was incredibly helpful because obviously anyone who was innocent would want to come forward, give their DNA and then prove their innocence. Just 2 people in the local area refused. One was father of 2, John Cooper. Now, John had had some good fortune earlier in his life. In 1978, he was working as a farm labourer when he won £90,000, which is about the equivalent of $500,000 today. He wasn't able to use this money wisely though, and he turned to drink and gambling. He was also reportedly quite a violent man. He regularly got into fights and he was so intimidating that his landlord had actually stopped asking him for rent money. Investigators searched John's property and tellingly discovered stolen items inside from the raids. They were thankfully able to convict him and put him behind bars for multiple burglaries in the area. However, there was no concrete evidence that he was involved in any of the murders. Years and years went by and the murders remained unsolved. Then John was released from prison after spending time behind bars. Now, massive rewind here, back to just before the Dixons were killed on their lovely summer holiday walk. May 1989, just 3 weeks prior to that, John actually appeared on the game show Bullseye. My brother loves this program. It's basically like a darts show where you can win good prizes. As reruns of the episode were shown on TV, John Cooper caught the eye of investigators. His appearance on the show was exactly like that original sketch of the suspect at the cash machine. Side on, as you can see, the resemblance is absolutely uncanny. Now, he must have changed up his look and got a haircut following the murders so that he wouldn't be caught. This caused officers to then do some digging. They really had a hunch that he was responsible for the 4 unsolved murders. They searched his workshop and discovered tiny fibres linking him to Richard and Helen Thomas. They also found Peter Dixon's DNA on a weapon found on his property, as well as the Dixon's DNA on John's swim shorts. Now, in a callous, desperate bid to try and save his own skin, he actually then decided to try and pin the murders on his own son. Now, police knew that his son was not to blame, and this was just a desperate ploy by John. His son didn't even live in the area around that time. In 2011, he was finally jailed for life and has failed to appeal. He was diagnosed as a psychopath and linked to numerous other unsolved murders in the area, but thankfully, locals are now free from his reign of terror.
Video that's going viral, posted by this random account on TikTok. He's in Mexico, right?
Okay.
He's just recording outside in the street, but he starts hearing a lot of dogs barking, and then they eventually start howling, and a lot of people are saying that he heard the Llorona, which I can't hear it in the video, but people are saying that if it's far, she's actually close, and if you hear her close, she's actually far.
Yeah.
He commented back, I heard her very, very far.
Chinga tu madre. Otra
That's it.
vez.
I think that's it, no?
Because it is dogs howling.
That's not a dog.
Yo, I didn't. Nah,
You hear it like
bro.
faintly.
Pedo.
Nah, this shit is crazy, bro. I'm not gonna lie. At first, I thought it was the dog's house.
That's not a dog, bro. Those other ones were not howls, bro. They sounded like a woman crying.
Let me know what you guys think. If you guys think the video is fake, if you guys believe in La Llorona, I think it's fucking real. Only because there's other videos where it's so obvious that they want you to hear like
La Llorona, yeah.
the Llorona and stuff, but this sounds like it's part of the video. And
Unanswered questions after a 911 call in Pueblo from a funeral home and cemetery. August 11th, just before 3:30 in the morning, the police department communications center got a call that they refer to as abandoned, meaning the other person hung up. So they called back, got an answer, and heard mostly static. An officer was sent out to check out the funeral home and cemetery and says it was locked up and dark with no one in sight.
So that phone call that you just heard was coming from this funeral home and cemetery in Pueblo, Colorado. The call came in at 3:28 a.m. and when the dispatcher at the police station picked up the phone call, they listened, nobody said anything, and then the caller hung up. However, as you heard in that video, the police dispatcher then called the phone number back, and that's when they got that spooky voice. That is just one of the creepiest things I've ever heard, I do have to say. And that call and voice came from somebody or something within the cemetery gates. There's just something so eerie to me about stories of people receiving phone calls or text messages from their loved ones who have passed on, or even in this case, receiving a phone call from an empty funeral home and cemetery. It's completely unexplainable. To this day, there's been no explanation, and that audio recording haunts me.
Sam Ballard was 19 years old with his whole life ahead of him. He was at a party with friends when a dare was thrown out in the air and it was meant to be innocent and funny. But nobody had an idea of the horror that would follow. One friend spotted something moving near their feet, a small slimy garden slug, and dared Sam to eat it. Sam accepted and then swallowed the slug without hesitation. But lurking within that slug was something deadly. Days after the dare, Sam started feeling sharp pains in his leg and a burning ache that wouldn't go away. His family rushed him to the hospital, desperate for answers. Doctors soon discovered the cause, the rat lungworm, a rare parasite that normally affects rats but had found its way into the slug. Now it was inside Sam, burrowing through his body, infecting his brain and wreaking havoc. The parasite invaded Sam's nervous system, and Sam was soon thrashing in agony. His body wrecked by violent seizures, his skin pale and clammy, and as the parasite buried deeper into his brain, Sam slipped into a coma. For 420 days, Sam laid in a coma, his family helplessly watching as he became a shell of his former self. When he finally woke, he was no longer the same young man he was before. The infection had ravaged his body, leaving him quadriplegic, unable to walk, talk, or even feed himself. Every day was a battle against pain, infections, and complications that no one could have imagined. Sam fought for nearly 8 years, enduring unimaginable suffering before he passed away in 2018.
I guarantee you've never heard of a deadly love triangle case as crazy as this one. What this woman did to get a guy is a whole other level. Dave Krupa was a 35-year-old man from Omaha in Nebraska. He worked as an auto repairman and had been in a very long-term serious relationship with a girl called Amy Flora. The pair had been together for years and years, and they even had 2 children together. He'd recently just come out of that relationship and was kind of adjusting to life being single. He really wasn't interested in a serious relationship right now. In 2012, he met a customer called Carrie Farver. The pair were both very attracted to each other right from the outset and began seeing each other, although he did explain to her that he just really wasn't looking to settle down right now. Now, it seemed like she was on the same page. She told him that she was just looking to have some fun too. Now, Dave, like I said, wasn't into committing right now, so he was dating other women, and one of these women was called Liz Golyar. Now, Liz had some things in common with Dave. She'd also had 2 children, but tragically, one of her children sadly passed away. This was in really horrific circumstances. Her little son, baby Cody, died in 1999 from shaken baby syndrome. Now, Liz was 21 at the time, and her boyfriend was called Glenn Herr. Now, Glenn admitted to police that he occasionally threw the baby in the air to make him laugh, and he was ultimately put in prison for 10 years for killing the child. So obviously that was extremely tragic, and Liz was single again with 1 child, and her ex was in prison. She was lonely and looking for a partner, and like I said, got together with Dave. Again though, he was honest with Liz and said he just wasn't looking for a full-on relationship, and she agreed to this. Soon after Dave and Liz began seeing each other, Liz did show a bit of jealousy. She was jealous that Dave and his baby mum had quite a decent relationship and were co-parenting. So Liz actually did end up convincing Dave to trial a relationship between the pair of them. And I think, to be honest, she ultimately just was grinding him down. She was constantly wanting a relationship and he really wasn't. So reluctantly, he accepted to do this kind of trial. However, that's when he started seeing this customer, Carrie, and also was still talking to other women online. It wasn't clear the exact timelines, but he was definitely seeing Carrie and Liz at the same time. So one evening when Dave was hanging out with Carrie, Liz kind of had a feeling that another woman was over at Dave's place, and although it wasn't really her place, she did just show up unannounced. The whole thing was very awkward, and the women ended up having this kind of brief encounter together, and it was just super weird. And the way Liz had been acting was kind of pushing Dave away, and he was more interested in Carrie, to be honest. So Carrie ended up spending more and more time at Dave's house and ended up staying over quite a bit as well because her workplace was quite close to Dave's apartment. On the 13th of November, the pair parted ways and Carrie headed to work. And shortly after, Dave got a text off Carrie that kind of took him by surprise. Carrie asked if she could move in with him, and he kind of politely declined this and almost thought she was joking. He then got a text off her along the lines of, "Fine, I don't ever want to see you again, go away, I'm dating someone else, I hate you." Carrie's family members also started getting very odd texts. Her mum got a text off her basically saying she was moving to Kansas completely out the blue. Her family really started to worry when Carrie actually missed some really important sort of moments in her family's lives, such as her half-brother's wedding and her dad's funeral. She was reported missing, but was kind of texting people saying, "Stop looking for me, like, leave me alone, I'm an adult and I've gone off on my own accord." And frustratingly, police couldn't get hold of her. Liz told Dave she too had been having some bizarre texts off Carrie. Then Liz told Dave that when she came home one day, she found her garage had been graffitied, which said the W word. Liz and Dave kind of bonded over this abuse that they were getting off Carrie, but on the 17th of August 2013, things got much worse. Liz called Dave in a mad panic. Her house had been set on fire and her pets were deceased. Now this was 2 dogs, a cat and a pet snake. They'd all perished in the fire. Dave then got a text from Carrie admitting it was her who did it. Carrie's mum ended up telling police that Carrie did have bipolar and maybe she'd stopped taking her medication or something, and that would explain all of this bizarre behaviour. Still, no one could find Carrie, and it wasn't until spring 2015 that detectives really amped up their search. Now, Liz went to the police and said to them that the harassment from Carrie had still been ongoing. She actually provided them with a theory. She said that she believed it might actually be Amy, the baby mum, sending her all this abuse. Officers also started to suspect that Carrie might actually be dead. They ended up finding her car, which had suspiciously been wiped down pretty much, but they did find blood stains in the vehicle. This kind of confirmed their theory that Carrie might actually be dead. So police ended up seizing Liz and Dave's phones, and what they found on Liz's phone shocked them. She had photos of Carrie's car and numerous fake email accounts, as well as an app that allowed her to schedule texts to be sent at a later time. Then, in a shocking turn of events, Liz called 911 in a panic, saying that Amy had shot her. She said she was injured, her leg had been shot, but she was alive. Now, investigators took this extremely seriously and questioned Amy, but she had a solid alibi. So what on earth was going on here? Police began to get very, very suspicious of Liz. But surely she wouldn't set fire to her own house, kill her own pets, and shoot herself in the leg, would she? It turns out she did, and she did a lot worse. Investigators found a horrific image on an SD card of Liz's that she tried to delete. It was Carrie's dead body. Liz had stabbed her to death all of those years ago and had been posing as her ever since. In 2017, Liz was convicted of first-degree murder and second-degree arson. She was given life in prison without the possibility of parole.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This guy, his name was Woo Young Ying.
Okay.
He was a experienced stuntman. What he would do is he would climb on top of these big ass towers, these light posts, electricity towers, buildings, whatever, and he would do pull-ups off the side of the buildings, bro.
Is he like a stuntman for movies and stuff, or just a stuntman just for
Nah,
himself?
bro, for himself, bro. He would post the videos on social media and stuff, and he had over 300 videos doing this. So he was experienced, right? And then his last ever stunt was in China, which is his hometown, right? He needed money because he was gonna like propose to his girlfriend, and then his mom ended up getting sick as well, and he got offered $15,000 to do this one stunt. So he went to the building. It was 62 stories high.
My hands are already getting sweaty, bro.
You could see him in the video. I'm gonna show you the video right now. In the beginning of the video, he starts wiping down the area. He's trying to make sure that everything is good, but
yeah, I remember seeing this
one
video,
pull-up,
bro.
2 pull-ups, and then the third one, he starts looking down.
Yeah.
Bro.
Yeah. That's so sad. I remember seeing that video. Look at my hands.
He was only 26 years old, but
Me personally, I don't really get like the whole parkour like on the high buildings. I've been seeing videos of people doing that stuff. I'm like, yo,
They're
why?
bugging, right?
Why?
Are you choosing bear or man? If you said man, this case might make you change your mind. Amy Moore was a beautiful and intelligent second-grade teacher from Illinois. She worked at the Grove Elementary School. She was a hard-working and loving mother to 3 boys, aged 11, 12 and 7. Amy and her ex Matthew had recently got divorced. Now Amy was struggling to care for their sons all alone, and she was kind of living paycheck to paycheck. As I said, she was very hardworking, and she just was trying to make ends meet so that she could look after her family. Now, tellingly, Amy had to take out orders of protection against Matthew. Tragically, Amy would be failed by the system. On the 29th of May in Normal, Illinois, the unthinkable happened. Matthew forced entry into Amy's home in the early hours of the morning. He confronted her and then shot her multiple times, killing her, before turning the weapon on himself. Amy's brother, Thomas Burns, stated that there had been numerous concerning incidents over the years, and Amy had really tried to protect herself and her family by getting law enforcement involved. Tragically, her 3 sons are now left without a mother. Thomas has since started a GoFundMe, which I'll put in my bio, to help to support the children.
This is by far the most brutal way somebody has ever died, and whatever you do, don't look up the picture. This is Octavio da Silva, and he was a 20-year-old soccer referee in Brazil. And on June 30th, 2013, he was refereeing a soccer game when he sent off a player named Josmir Santos Abreu, who was 31 years old. He refused to leave the field and began to fight with the referee, Octavio. Josmir threw a punch which made Octavio draw a knife from his pocket and repeatedly stab Josmir. Josmir died on his way to the hospital, and when fans watching the game, including Josmir's family and friends, found out about his death, something absolutely disturbing happened. They all invaded the field and stoned Octavio before decapitating him and then ripping his limbs off his body with just their strength and no weapons. And they then put his head on a stick in the middle of the field like a flag. And what makes this even worse is that a graphic video surfaced online shortly after the incident, showing medical personnel reassembling Octavio's body. The video and pictures are extremely and utterly disturbing. I seriously don't recommend looking them up. The way that his limbs looked after being ripped off is extremely unsettling to look at, because you see strings of flesh, tissue, and bone because nothing was cut off properly since everything was brutally ripped off. This case is just absolutely awful, and why in the world did Octavio pull out a knife when somebody just punched him? If he didn't stab Josmir to death, he would still be alive today and not torn apart in this brutal fashion. Just imagine literally being ripped limb from limb by an angry group of soccer fans, and there's nothing you can do as they pull your body apart.
This sick freak used the username KiwiPedo online and attempted to buy a child from the dark web. Oh yeah, did I mention he's a free man walking out in society right now? Let's talk about this. This is Aaron Hutton from New Zealand. In the year 2014, New Zealand police started tracking an account that went by KiwiPedo on the dark web. And the chats that this user was having with undercover police were disturbing. Aaron had responded to an ad that an undercover officer posted offering a Chinese child for sale for $10,000. Aaron reached out and it seemed like he was deadly serious. During his conversations with the undercover officer, Aaron referenced Joseph Fritzl, the man who imprisoned his own daughter for 24 years in Austria, repeatedly assaulted her, and even had children with her. Aaron referred to Joseph as his hero. And when the undercover officer asked Aaron if having a random Chinese child in his home would raise any suspicion, Aaron, chatting as Kiwi Pedo, responded, "It's called a basement." So eventually Aaron started telling the undercover officer that he would pay up to $15,000 in cash or Bitcoin for a child under 7. And soon afterwards, the authorities were able to pinpoint where his chats were coming from, his workplace, and Aaron was then arrested and his workplace and house were searched. Now, investigators actually found 417 CP or CSAM images and videos on Aaron's devices, which in my opinion is enough to be a life sentence. But after all was said and done, after this man tried to purchase a child under 7 years old on the dark web, after he was found to be in possession of hundreds of CP and CSAM images and videos, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. And to add insult to injury, his 5-year sentence was thrown out and he was resentenced to only 3 years in prison. This happened a few years ago, so that means that he's back out in society right now. Yes, Aaron has already been released. He's already served his full sentence for all of that. And it truly just makes me sick to my stomach that people like this keep getting away with these crimes time and time again. When you're in possession of hundreds of CP or CSAM images, that should be treated as you victimizing hundreds of children. But the government doesn't see it that way for some reason. I don't understand why. And yeah, he's back out. If you want to hear more true crime stories, be sure to listen to my wife and I's podcast, Murder in America, available on all streaming platforms.
Stabbed his estranged wife to death as part of a religious prophecy in front of their 8-year-old son. This is the disturbing and infuriating case of Star Murrah. On November 7th, 2021, police were called to Star's Vancouver, Washington home, and when they arrived, they found that she'd been stabbed multiple times in the neck. Her son was still inside, but luckily unharmed. Police then found her estranged husband, Michael Murrah, around the side of the house holding a knife, and his hands were covered in blood. Michael told police that he stabbed his wife as part of a religious prophecy. He told them that he killed someone named Starbeast and that he killed Starbeast to fulfill the prophecy. He said that Jesus told him to make a sacrifice for the good of all, so he murdered his wife in cold blood. Michael was arrested at the scene and was initially charged with aggravated first-degree murder, which, if he was convicted, would have meant a mandatory life sentence without parole. However, he was recently acquitted of all charges by reason of insanity. At the trial, the defense agreed that he killed Star, but said it was because he was experiencing hallucinations and heard voices telling him to do it. 3 different forensic psychologists evaluated Michael's mental health, and while they all didn't quite agree on the underlying condition, they did all agree that he had experienced psychosis at the time of the murder. They said that at the time, he wasn't able to tell right from wrong, and because of this, Clark County Superior Court Judge Susan Clark declared him criminally insane. This is a little crazy to me considering Michael admitted to driving over to Star's house that night with a Bible and a knife. So to me that seems a little planned. Judge Susan Clark committed him to Western State Hospital, which is a psychiatric hospital, possibly for the rest of his life, as she deemed him a substantial danger. She also ruled him to have no contact with Star's family or their son. But let me tell you why this really isn't justice. So Star and Michael were in the process of getting a divorce because of how abusive and dangerous Michael was, and Star tried so hard to get help because of it, but nobody listened. Star called police on several occasions to report abuse, and just a year before her murder, she had filed for a permanent restraining order against Michael. But the court denied it, essentially saying that they didn't have any evidence of a crime happening. But in her court documents, Star reported that on one occasion, Michael had threatened to kill himself and had sat outside her bedroom door with a knife. She also said that after they would argue, he would put a knife beside their bed to try and scare her. She wrote how she was scared for her and her son's life and knew that one day he was going to kill her. Everyone said that Star lived in fear, so much so that she had her neighbor walk her in her home every night. And sadly, that was the same neighbor who found Star after she'd been stabbed and called 911, staying by her side until help came. She did everything right to try and protect herself, but nobody listened. It was pretty well documented outside of this that Michael was a danger to society. Like, this wasn't just random. According to reports, Michael was in therapy between August 2020 and up until the murder. And during those visits, he reported hallucinations, hearing voices, psychosis, and religious delusions, but still nothing was done. The system 100% failed Star, and sadly, this is not the first time that Clark County has done this. They have a horrible history of releasing violent offenders and ignoring police for help. Judge Susan Clark said she knew that her decision to acquit Michael would not be a popular one. She said that she wanted to use this case to shed light on society's failure to treat mental illness.
Conspiracy of the Denver airport.
Never heard of it.
You've never heard, bro? There's no way you've never seen the blue statue, the blue horse with the red eyes.
No.
You never seen that?
No.
The conspiracy goes is that that whole airport's a bunker for the end of the world, and there's a lot of tunnels that basically is not open to the public. It's just there in the airport, but they don't know for what reason or why. It also took them an extra $2 billion to build whatever they were building, and this led on to many people believing that there's something underground, something under the airport. When they built the fucking airport, there was a lot of senior symbolism. Like there's a time capsule with a senior symbol that's said to be opened in 2094. There's also a lot of imagery and a lot of the murals around the airport. And the biggest one is the statue that I showed you. That Blue Mustang statue is also said to be cursed. The reason why is that the artist that got assigned to make that statue, his name was Luis Jimenez. In the process of building it, a piece of the statue fell and they killed him. Eventually his kids finished the statue and shit, and that's why it's up right now. And also, I'm gonna show you a couple images of the murals and stuff that's inside the airport. They got taken down now because of how harsh and like weird they were and how much attention they got.
Oh no.
So as you can see, this is symbolism to like, that's basically a soldier stabbing a dove. Dove is a sign of peace. There's children in coffins.
That was there, bro.
That was there. And there's also like this, like bunch of buildings.
How would you handle being released from prison after being convicted of murder? Gypsy Rose and her mum Dee Dee looked like a close mother and daughter. Gypsy appeared disabled and her mother went everywhere with her, pushing her in her wheelchair. Dee Dee explained to everyone that her daughter suffered with multiple conditions, including leukemia and muscular dystrophy. Gypsy was prescribed endless medications for these various complaints. She also went through a number of various surgeries and procedures. However, it would later be revealed that nothing was as it seemed. The truth was, Gypsy was perfectly able to walk. She had none of the illnesses her mother had claimed she had. She wasn't bald due to having cancer, she was bald because her mother shaved her head for attention and sympathy. Eventually, Gypsy met a man online called Nicholas. She told him about her mum and the pair came up with a fatal plan. In June 2015, Nicholas stabbed and killed Dee Dee while Gypsy waited nearby. Gypsy was released from prison in December last year. You may be familiar with this case from the documentary The Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. It's on Crime and Investigation and Crime and Investigation Play. It's currently still available to watch if you missed it. There's now a brand new series. Gypsy Rose Life After Lockup follows Gypsy as she's released from prison. It looks at how she navigates coping with life on the outside. Gypsy Rose Life After Lockup starts on the 10th of June at 9 p.m. Catch it only on the Crime and Investigation channel or stream it on the Crime and Investigation Play app. See the link in my bio for more details.
Martin Weiss is another Nickelodeon pedophile that they don't want you talking about. And he defended pedophilia allegations against him by claiming that his 11-year-old victim wanted it. This is Martin Weiss. He's a former Hollywood talent agent and a pedophile. Back in 2011, one of Martin Weiss's former clients, an 18-year-old actor turned musician, reported him to the police. This client claimed that Martin Weiss sexually assaulted him from the age of 11 all the way till the age of 15, or the entire time that he was his talent agent. Martin Weiss also threatened the victim's career. This is a quote from the press release. They said, "The victim said Martin told him that what they were doing was common practice in the entertainment industry, and if the victim were to tell anyone, it would ruin the victim's career and hurt them both." The victim, though, finally fed up with the abuse and fearing for the safety of other children, went to the police. That's when Martin was ultimately arrested and charged with 8 felonies. But as reported in the LA Times, when Martin was confronted by authorities about the assault of a minor, he claimed the kid wanted it. This is a quote from the LA Times. During the November 15th conversation, Martin Weiss claimed the boy invited the interaction and claimed that the Penn State situation was different because those kids didn't want it. So Martin Weiss, who was a prolific talent agent, worked on a number of different shows like iCarly, Parenthood, The Muppet Movie. So yeah, this is extremely disturbing, and I think that the Nickelodeon reckoning is still going to continue for a while.
Welcome to Famous Autopsies Part 2. In this series, I'll be breaking down famous celebrity autopsy reports, so this is a massive trigger warning. Today we are going to be talking about Kurt Cobain, who is the lead singer of Nirvana. Kurt Cobain was outspoken about his struggles with mental health and addiction, often including it into his songs, but he also struggled with health issues. He was affected by chronic bronchitis and debilitating stomach pains. On March 31st, 1994, he fled from a rehab facility after just 3 days. and took a cab to a gun shop in Seattle where, according to the receipt, he purchased shotgun shells, and on April 8th, an electrician who was meant to install security lighting found what he believed to be a sleeping Kurt Cobain in a studio attached to his house. But upon closer inspection, he saw blood coming from his ears. Sadly, Kurt Cobain was dead at just 27. His external exam revealed numerous needle puncture marks, with associating bruising and an entrance wound in the front roof of his mouth. It's accompanied by several lacerations, some with tissue hanging. The lacerations are likely a result of gases leaving the barrel with strong force. The internal exam revealed that the path of the bullet was upwards, front to back and slightly left to right. His skull sustained several fractures, meaning broken in multiple places in several regions. His brain was transected by the bullet, meaning severed. The lack of blood on scene is due to the fact that the entrance wound was inside of his mouth and the bullet settled in his head, meaning there was no exit wound. Rest in peace to Kurt Cobain, you will always be missed.
This woman murdered her husband in the most unusual way, and their son witnessed the whole thing. It was September 2016. Ramandeep Kaur Man from Derby was married to Sukhjit Singh. The pair had met in 2002 when Ramandeep was 17 and he was 20. They married each other a few years later and went on to have 2 sons. From the outside, the pair looked happy. However, things would soon come to a chilling end for the pair, witnessed entirely by their son. Now, Sukhjit's childhood best friend Gurpreet Singh was secretly having an affair with his wife. They'd been seeing each other for about a year behind his back when they hatched a murderous plan. It's believed that the motive behind this was to claim on his life insurance policy. On the 2nd of September, Ramandeep was cooking for her husband. His favourite dish was a biryani, and she knew this. She took some substances and laced his curry with them. She served it up to him, and after eating the curry, he became quite disoriented, quite sleepy, and quite confused. He headed up to bed, and his wife followed, along with his friend Gurpreet. Shortly after, Ramandeep held a pillow over his head. As he gasped for breath, it woke up the pair's eldest son, Arjun. The 9-year-old watched in horror as Gurpreet hit his dad over the head with a hammer. Ramandeep then cut his throat. Now, the child was obviously traumatized by witnessing all this, but bravely eventually gave evidence in court. The murderous pair never did get to claim the £2 million life insurance policy. Gurpreet was given life in prison and fined £3,000. Ramandeep has been sentenced to death but has appealed.
How do you not know that your 3 friends have been dead in your backyard for 3 days? And why would you not call the police? Everyone should be talking about this case because it's insane. On Sunday, January 7th, these 3 men went to their friend's house in Kansas City, Missouri to watch the Kansas City Chiefs football game. The men were Ricky Johnson, David Harrington, and Clayton McGeeney, and the house that they went to watch the game was being rented by their friend Jordan Willis. That was the last time that anyone ever heard from these men. After days of not being able to contact them, Clayton's fiance went to Jordan's home on the 5200 block of Northwest 83rd Terrace in Northland, and it was there that she discovered all of the men's cars still parked in the driveway, including Clayton's. After knocking on the door but receiving no answer, she eventually broke into the basement of the home, and she began loudly calling out for Jordan and announcing that she was there, but still she got no answer. After going further into the house, she discovered a dead body outside on the back porch, and she then called the Kansas City police. This all happened at around 10 p.m. on Tuesday night. When authorities arrived, they discovered 2 more dead bodies outside in the backyard, and unfortunately, they all belonged to Ricky, David, and Clayton. But this is where the story starts to get odd. It was only after police arrived that the resident of the home and the men's friend Jordan came out of a bedroom. But he reportedly came out really calm in his boxers and holding an empty wine glass as if nothing was wrong. Jordan then told police and later his family that it seems as though his friend simply froze to death, yet he never once called police to report the bodies. According to a Facebook post made by a friend of the 3 men found deceased, multiple people had been trying to call Jordan in the days following the men's disappearance, and he even reportedly read messages from people looking for them, but he never responded. The entire time that his friends were dead in the backyard, he was alive inside of his home, and he even ignored another friend pounding on his door for 20 minutes trying to locate the men. According to police, a cause of death for the men has not yet been determined, as they're waiting on autopsy and toxicology results, which could take weeks. But they did state that there were no obvious signs of foul play, and because of this, Jordan has not been arrested or charged with the crime. According to Police Sergeant Jake Bacina, although Jordan was initially cooperative the night the bodies were found, he doesn't know why he never contacted police to report what happened. Regardless, Sergeant Bacina has stated, quote, "This case is 100% not being investigated as a homicide." End quote. This has obviously made friends and family of the victims furious. None of them believe Jordan's story, and they're demanding answers. As of right now, the case is still ongoing. A search warrant is in the process of being obtained for Jordan's home, and authorities have recovered all 3 of the victims' cell phones to go through to try and piece together what happened that night. This case is very odd, and adding to the mystery is the fact that none of Jordan's neighbors heard or saw anything suspicious that night or in the following days. As for Jordan, he has reportedly moved out of the home since the incident, and I'm not sure if that's because he was forced to by police because it's considered a crime scene, or if his landlord evicted him because of the situation. Whatever reasoning he has not sat well with the public, and they think it's really suspicious. Jordan is a scientist working in experimental drug trials for HIV, and he's been described as incredibly intelligent but overall weird by the people that know him. Jordan also owns 2 dogs who he says are his life, and at this point, I'm not sure if the dogs were in the home while his friends' bodies were in the backyard, because if they were and he had taken them out, he would have for sure seen them, so that also adds to the mystery. If you have any information regarding this case, please contact 816-474-TIPS.
This one's been going viral recently too. It's about a cop that laughed at a woman being ran over. So back in January, there was a 23-year-old woman. Her name was Janavi Kandula. She was a master's student at Northeastern University. She was an international student. She came to study abroad to support her single mother back in India. And this one night where she's just literally crossing the street, and then she gets ran over by cop, bro, going 74 miles per hour in the 25 zone, bro. She only had 3 months left for her to graduate. Bro, that's so sad. Her life was just taken in an instant, and all because of some dumb shit, bro. The cop who hit her, his name was Kevin Dave, and this motherfucker had history of speeding tickets. He had his license suspended back in 2018, and now there was another cop. His name was Daniel Otterer, and he's the vice president of the whole Seattle Police Guild, and he's basically just joking around, poking fun at it. And this motherfucker is supposed to be the cop that's investigating the one who ran the girl over, bro.
I don't think she was thrown 40 feet either. I think she went up on the hood, hit the windshield, then when he hit the brakes, flew off the car. But she is dead. Yeah, just write a check. Yeah, $11,000. She was 26 anyway. She had limited value.
Limited value?
The guy literally was like, "Oh no, it was a misunderstanding."
That's fucking disturbing to hear, bro. The fact that a cop thinks that way, bro, is even worse. How the do people allow people like this to be cops, bro? Cops are...
So this is incredibly disturbing. A teacher at a Christian school in Florida was just arrested for using a yearbook to make images of his underage students online. You can't make this stuff up. This is what's happening every day here in America. So this is 67-year-old Stephen Hauser. He taught 3rd grade science at the Beacon Christian Academy in Newport Richey, Florida. Now, everybody seemed to love Stephen. That is until an anonymous tip was made recently that led to his arrest. So, according to Stephen himself, yes, he admitted this. He used a yearbook containing photos of his students to generate these child porn images. I don't know exactly how many videos or photos Stephen had in his possession, but he admitted to using 3 of his underage students' photos to create this disgusting material. And according to a news report, authorities found 2 CP photos and 3 CP videos in Stephen's possession. I don't know if that stuff was AI generated or not, but either way, this is just a disturbing, sick story. And it's frightening thinking about how predators like this guy are going to be able to use AI and technology like that to fulfill these sick and twisted fantasies that they have. What regulations do we have to prohibit this stuff from happening? After all, a tip from somebody was what got Stephen arrested. Who knows how many millions of other people are out there doing this sort of thing that haven't been caught and may not ever be caught. It's truly just some disturbing stuff, and I hate even thinking about it. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
This is by far the most horrific thing that was ever live streamed. This absolutely horrific murder that I'm about to explain was live streamed on Instagram. This is extremely disturbing, so this is a massive trigger warning. On August 11, 2023, Bosnia bodybuilder named Nermin Selmanovic murdered his wife live on Instagram Live, all while 12,000 people watched. Nermin had been abusing his wife during their entire marriage, and the pair had a young child. On the morning of August 11th, he told his followers that they could witness a live killing. As the live stream continues, he then turns the camera to his ex-wife, whose face was bloodied and disfigured from multiple injuries, probably from him repeatedly hitting her over and over again. He then starts talking to her, calling her derogatory names, and blames her for her own death because she reported him to the police. And what makes this even more disturbing is throughout the entire live stream, you can hear their child just screaming, crying. He then tells his followers that he's the child's father and his ex had hidden the toddler from him for over a week. He then picks up the gun, points it at his ex-wife's head, and then fires one shot into her forehead, killing her. It's absolutely horrifying, and I don't recommend looking for it. After doing this, he then tells his followers on Instagram to come and save the child. A police chase then began, and Nermin went on a shooting rampage. He continued to film and tells his viewers that he killed 2 other people, who actually turned out to be an innocent man and his young son. He ended up taking his own life on that same day. This is a case when after you get done researching it, you just don't feel right. This is very sad and very disturbing. Whatever you do, don't go looking for the live stream because it's honestly something you just don't want to see.
My grandma killed her mom in the same fashion as Eric and Lyle Menendez killed their parents. Scratch that, it was actually in a much more brutal and gory way. And there are so many similarities between the two cases, yet their outcomes are completely different. So let's talk about it. In September of 1990, my grandma Chris was giving her mom Lois a bath. Lois was in her 60s and was recovering from a hip surgery, so she needed the extra help. And my grandma didn't mind going to her home to help her. They both lived in Yakima, Washington, which is my hometown. At some point during the bath, my grandma brought up her childhood and how she was severely sexually abused by one of her stepdads. I won't go into detail about the abuse, but just know that it was really bad. This is when Lois reportedly admitted to knowing about the abuse the entire time it was happening, but she blamed my grandma for it and not the stepdad. What followed has never really been explained, but an altercation happened that resulted in Lois, my great-grandma, drowning. Instead of calling the police, my grandma went back to her house, which was right down the road, and didn't say a word to anybody. Over the next 2 days, according to what my grandma said, she couldn't stop hearing Lois's voice, even though at this point, Lois had long been dead. So my grandma went back to her house where she was still in the tub, obviously, and she proceeded to dismember her mom with a handsaw. She cut her body into 8 pieces, focusing on her jaw because she said she needed her to stop talking. And then she threw what was left into a local landfill. She took the major pieces, which included her head, artificial hip, and jaw, and put them into 2 garbage cans and then filled them up with cement. My grandma then rented a storage unit where she hid her mom's body parts for 2 whole years. Now, during this time, she was spotted by Lois's neighbors in her backyard with a blue tarp and a shovel. But she would go on to tell everyone, including the police, that Lois had taken a spontaneous trip to Hawaii with a rich man that she had recently met. She even faked letters claiming to be Lois that she then sent to everyone, trying to make things look less suspicious. I still have one of the letters, and it's honestly really creepy to read knowing the truth behind it. During this time, my grandma cashed Lois's social security checks and even sold her second home and kept the money. In total, I think she stole around $140,000. People started suspecting that she could have been involved in her mom's sudden disappearance, and after investigators started focusing on her, she turned herself in 2 years later. Now, during the trial, the defense argued that my grandma just snapped because she had PTSD from the severe trauma that she experienced as a child. It was argued that my grandma's mental growth was stunted because of the abuse, and so when her mom admitted to knowing about it the entire time, it pushed her over the edge, causing her to commit murder. Because of this, my grandma was convicted of second-degree manslaughter and served just under 2 years in prison. She's been out ever since, living in the exact same house as she was during the murders. Because of how much attention that the Menendez brothers story is getting, it's caused me to really compare the 2 cases, and I just can't help but notice how similar they are. It's kind of scary. But the only difference is my grandma only served 2 years in prison. She's gotten to live a relatively normal life ever since. Meanwhile, the Menendez brothers are serving a life sentence. They didn't get a life, and I just don't think that's very fair when there are cases almost identical to theirs with such different outcomes. Don't get me wrong, murder is bad, and no shade to my grandma, grandma, but it's not hard to see why she got out and they didn't. In both cases, the suspects killed their parents in a brutal way. And technically speaking, my grandma was probably a little bit worse with how she did it. They both lied to cover it up afterwards, but while Eric and Lyle only lied for 6 months, my grandma lied for years. They both spent their parents' money after the fact, which doesn't look good in either cases, and they were all victims of horrific sexual abuse as children. Yet for some reason, my grandma was seen as a victim while Eric and Lyle weren't. And I know for a fact it's because men who experience sexual assault even as children a lot of the times aren't seen as victims. And it's a shame because they were victims and they are victims, just like my grandma was. And this all happened around the same time, so it's just really crazy how similar they are, yet how different everything ended up for them. I just cannot stop thinking about this, and it is really eating at my brain. I'm just really hoping that the new evidence in the Menendez brothers case will be taken into account. They deserve a life too.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
These are creepy things you never knew existed. Okay, so every single one of us would love to go and visit Japan. But if you do, whatever you do, never stay at these hotels in Japan. There are these hotels in Japan that cost only $1 a night to stay in. But there's a disturbing twist. These hotels live stream every single one of your movements to complete random people and strangers. So every single second you're spending in these rooms, you will be live streamed to thousands of people, just watching your every movement for no reason at all. They can watch you eat, sleep, bite your nails, or just anything else that you do. But the scariest part about this whole thing is that your identity, your face, and your location is now known by thousands of random strangers. So unless you're a person that likes going to random countries and having your location and identity known by every single person, this might be the place for you to stay. But let's be honest, I don't think anybody wants that. But I know there's some people with a budget that would just get over all of that and pay the dollar. But in my opinion, this is just weird and just kind of disturbing. These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so we all know if a nuclear war ever happened, the two big dogs in it would be Russia versus the United States. And the video I'm about to show you is a super realistic simulation of an all-out nuclear war between Russia and the United States. This is absolutely terrifying, and just imagine all of these nukes going off at once. Because this is what would happen.
This British father of four did the unthinkable on Facebook Live. So this is Paul David Hilton. He was 34 years old, and on April 30th of 2022, he started a live stream on his personal Facebook account. Now, to everybody that knew Paul, he seemed like one of the happiest people around. And when Paul started his live stream that evening, multiple friends and family members joined in. According to one friend named Lewis, he thought that Paul would be telling jokes or doing something amusing. He even said he thought the live stream would be funny. But the events that unfolded in Paul's home pictured above that evening would be far from funny. And in fact, when people joined in, they noticed that Paul had extremely slurred speech and he didn't seem like himself. It was when people really realized what Paul was about to do, though, when they started calling the police and authorities, but it was too late. On that live stream, Paul took his own life by hanging and broadcast it in front of all of his friends and family that were watching. Now, after investigation was done, Paul's blood alcohol level was found to be 2.5 times the normal limit, and they also found cocaine in his system. Those extremely close to Paul knew that he had struggled with mental health issues in the past, and that even recently, the year before, he had been referred to an addiction counseling center. But it seems like his struggles with drug abuse and mental health really got the best of Paul when he decided to live stream his own unaliving on that evening.
in Tonopah has now been ranked among the most haunted hotels in the country.
3 miners set out to rob the bank one day, and one miner shot the other 2, leaving their bodies in the vault.
In one of the corner rooms on the 5th floor is where he started to strangle her.
According to Tracy, if you pull back the carpeting in that very spot, you can still see her bloodstains in the wood flooring.
The Mitzpah Hotel is believed by many to be home of several ghostly figures.
In this episode, we're investigating 2 of the most haunted places in Nevada, the Clown Motel and the Mizpah.
Oh! Hotel! Oh, oh!
2 people murdered in here.
Yeah, and they are said to be down here. Our number 1 lady of the night, Miss Rose, over here.
Evelyn.
No!
The lady in red's name is Evelyn.
Lots of people have died here.
Do you want me to turn my light on red?
Right when I hit red, dude.
Oh, what the was that?
Are you the spirit of the killer?
You scared? Who is the evil man?
Man evil.
Why do you like to scratch people, though? Are you afraid of people getting too close to the truth?
Seven pit bulls ripped this man's face off, killing him, and it's absolutely brutal. This 46-year-old man named Aglacer Pereira was going for his morning walk one day when he was suddenly attacked and brutally killed by dogs. He was ambushed by 7 pit bulls and had his face completely ripped off. They escaped from a farm and attacked the first thing they saw, which was Aglacer. A brave passerby rescued him from the gruesome attack and called an ambulance. They then helped the victim down the road to meet the emergency vehicle. Aglacer was rushed to the Santa Cruz Hospital in central Pinho, over 20 miles away from the area where the incident took place. The pit bulls had completely bitten off all the skin on his face, leaving his skull completely exposed. The only way I could really describe how his face looked is if you poured red paint all over a white skull and let it dry. He had no eyes, no lips, no nose, no facial features at all. It was just skull and blood and some skin left over and some tissue. I really don't recommend looking up the photo because it will make you lose sleep. It's absolutely disturbing. But after Aglacer arrived at the hospital, he tragically succumbed to his injuries. Can you just imagine enjoying your daily walk and you see 7 pit bulls running towards you? I know I would be absolutely terrified. I feel so bad for Aglacer, and may he rest in peace. This is absolutely brutal. This might be the most brutal way somebody has ever died, and whatever you do, don't look up the picture. Octavio da Silva was a 20-year-old soccer referee in Brazil, and on June 30th, 2013, he was refereeing a soccer game when he sent off a player named Josmir Santos Abreu, who was 31 years old. He refused to leave the field and began a fight with the referee. Abreu threw a punch which made Octavio draw a knife from his pocket and repeatedly stab Abreu. Abreu died on the way to the hospital, and when fans watching the game, including Abreu's family and friends, found out about his death, they invaded the field and stoned Octavio before decapitating him, and then ripping his limbs from his body with just their strength and no weapons, and then put his head on a stick in the middle of the field. And what makes this worse is that a graphic video surfaced online shortly after the incident, showing medical personnel reassembling Octavio's body. The video and pictures are extremely disturbing, and I don't recommend looking them up. The way his limbs looked after being ripped off is extremely unsettling to look at, because you see strings of flesh, tissue, and bone because it wasn't cut off properly and it was just ripped off. This case is absolutely awful, but why did Octavio pull out a knife when somebody just punched him? If he didn't stab Josmir Abreu to death, he would still be alive today. But just imagine being literally ripped limb from limb by an angry group of soccer fans, and there's nothing you can do as they pull your body apart.
These are the heartbreaking final texts of a victim from the Pulse nightclub shooting. Pulse was one of the biggest nightclubs in Orlando, Florida. On the evening of the 11th of June 2016, they were hosting a Latin night. Pulse was a gay nightclub and they regularly had drag queens performing for the crowds. Around 2 a.m. of the morning of the 12th of June, an attack began. Suddenly, a man opened fire on around 300 people that were inside the venue. Initially, there was confusion and some people thought that it was firecrackers or part of the music. At 2:09, the club posted on Facebook, "Everyone get out of Pulse and keep running." The gunman had exchanged fire with a policeman at the door who was working that night. Now, Imran Yusuf, who was a veteran working as a bouncer, recognised the sound of gunfire. He jumped over a locked door where behind people were hiding in fear. He opened a latched door behind them, allowing around 70 people to escape. His quick thinking undoubtedly saved many lives. Police raced to the scene and a battle began inside which forced the gunman back. Terrifyingly, he took several hostage in the toilets at the back of the building. He warned police that he had explosives. During this time, terrified partygoers text loved ones to try and get help. 30-year-old accountant Eddie Justice sent these heartbreaking texts to his mum. At 2:45 a.m., the gunman, identified as Omar